It was the kind of neighborhood where the kids played outside until the streetlights flickered on, where neighbors waved at each other from their porches, and nothing ever seemed out of place. Until the Johnson family moved into the house on Willow Street. The house had been vacant for years, no one knew why. Some said it was too old to run down. Others whispered about the strange things that had happened to the previous owners, but no one dared to say much beyond that. The Johnsons didn't care. They had gotten the place for a steal, and to them, it was a fresh start. It began with small things. The sound of footsteps on the old wooden floors when no one was home, doors creaking open in the middle of the night. Typical old house sounds, they thought, but soon, the occurrences became too unsettling to ignore. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, their son Tommy mentioned something odd. "There's a lady in the hallway," he said casually, stabbing his fork into his mashed potatoes. His mother chuckled nervously. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Tommy didn't look up. "The lady with the white dress. She's always standing there, right outside my room." His father froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Tommy, there's no lady in the house," he said, trying to mask the sudden tension in his voice. Tommy shrugged. "She's been here since we moved in." That night, after everyone went to bed, Tommy's father, Mark, found himself unable to sleep. He tossed and turned, replaying Tommy's words in his mind. Just a child's imagination, he told himself, though the explanation offered little comfort. Finally, around midnight, he got up to get a glass of water. As he passed by Tommy's room, he heard something, a whisper. Faint, but undeniable. He stopped, pressing his ear to the door. "Tommy." The whisper grew louder, though it was not his son's voice. It was a woman's voice, low and eerie, saying something he couldn't quite make out. Heart pounding, Mark threw the door open. Tommy lay sound asleep in his bed, but the room was ice cold, and there, at the foot of his bed, was a shadow. A figure in a white dress, just as Tommy had described. It stood there, facing the wall, and moving. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to scream, to wake his wife, but fear rooted him to the spot. The figure slowly turned, its face obscured by a veil of dark, tangled hair, and then it whispered again. "He's mine." Mark backed out of the room, slamming the door behind him, heart racing. His wife jolted awake at the noise and rushed to him. But when they opened Tommy's door again, the room was empty, no shadow, no whisper. Just their son, sleeping soundly as if nothing had happened. The following days were a blur of tension. Mark couldn't shake the image of the woman, and strange occurrences increased. Lights flickered on and off, furniture moved on its own, and the whispers, they grew louder. One evening, as Mark sat alone in the living room, the TV suddenly turned on by itself. The screen showed only static, but within the static, he saw her just for a split second. The woman in the white dress, her face, twisted in agony, mouth open in a silent scream. He turned off the TV, shaking. It was no longer possible to deny what was happening. The house was haunted. Desperate for answers, he began digging into the history of the house. What he found chilled him to his core. Years ago, a woman named Emily lived there with her son. She had been widowed, and the loss had driven her to the brink of madness. One stormy night, in a fit of delusion, she believed her son had been possessed by evil. She drowned him in the bathtub, thinking she was saving him. When she realized what she'd done, she took her own life. Her ghost, they said, never left the house. Mark knew then that Emily's spirit had attached itself to Tommy. She believed his son was hers, and she wouldn't stop until she had him. That night, Mark decided they had to leave. But as they packed, the house seemed to come alive. Doors slammed shut, windows rattled, and the whispers filled every room. Mark raced to Tommy's room, but the door wouldn't budge. From the other side, he heard his son's voice, faint and terrified. "Dad, help me." He threw his weight against the door, finally breaking it open. Inside, the room was freezing, and there, standing over Tommy's bed, was Emily. Her eyes, hollow and black, locked onto Mark's. "He's mine," she whispered again, reaching for Tommy. Mark lunged at her, but his hands passed right through her cold, ghostly form. She vanished, and Tommy screamed, clutching his head. Without another word, Mark grabbed Tommy and ran. They left everything behind and never looked back. To this day, no one lives in the house on Willow Street. But some nights, if you walk by, you can still hear the faint sound of whispers. Emily, still searching for her lost son.